The rescue alarm pierced through the morning air at Naval Station Norfolk as Lieutenant Linda Morrison rushed toward the diving platform, her gear bag bouncing against her hip with each determined step. At 5'4" and 125 pounds, she looked almost fragile compared to the massive rescue vessel that would carry her team into treacherous waters. The other Navy divers, all men, watched her approach with barely concealed skepticism. To them, she was a liability in heavy gear, too small to handle the physical demands of deep-sea rescue operations. What they didn't know was that they were looking at the most skilled underwater rescue specialist in the Navy, whose precision and determination would soon rewrite everything they thought they knew about courage beneath the waves. Welcome to those who left a trace. Before we dive into this incredible story of skill, determination, and proving doubters wrong in the most dangerous environment on Earth, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who risk everything to save lives. The USS Hornet had been conducting routine training exercises in the Atlantic when disaster struck without warning. A catastrophic hull breach in the submarine's forward compartment had triggered emergency protocols, forcing the crew to surface rapidly. But something had gone wrong during the emergency blow, a mechanical failure that left 12 sailors trapped in a partially flooded compartment 300 feet below the surface, with oxygen running out and no way to reach the surface on her own. Lieutenant Linda Morrison stood on the deck of the rescue vessel Redemption, studying the sonar readings that painted a grim picture of the situation below. 8 years of naval service had taken her from basic diving school to the elite deep-sea rescue unit, where she had logged over 150 successful rescue operations in conditions that would terrify most people. But this mission would push even her exceptional skills to their absolute limits. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Stone, a 20-year veteran with arms like tree trunks and a voice that carried the authority of countless dangerous dives, approached Linda with the mission briefing. His expression made it clear that he wasn't happy about the team composition for this critical operation. "Morrison," Stone began, his tone carrying barely concealed frustration, "I don't know what headquarters was thinking assigning you to this mission. 300 feet in heavy seas with 12 lives on the line isn't a job for someone your size." Linda looked up from the technical specifications she'd been reviewing, her blue eyes calm despite the obvious challenge to her capabilities. "Chief, I've successfully completed rescues at depths exceeding 250 feet. My size hasn't been a factor in any of those operations." "This isn't 250 feet," Stone replied harshly. "This is 300 feet in 30-knot winds with a damaged submarine that could shift or collapse at any moment. The physical demands alone will overwhelm you before you even reach the hull." Around them, the other members of the rescue team watched the confrontation with interest. Petty Officer Jake Rodriguez, a former college football player whose diving gear looked almost small on his massive frame, shook his head in obvious disagreement with Linda's assignment. "Chief's right," Rodriguez muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Deep rescue isn't a job for someone who needs help carrying their own gear. What happens when she can't maneuver an unconscious sailor through a flooded compartment?" Petty Officer Tom Bradley nodded in agreement. "We should request a replacement before we waste time on an operation that's doomed from the start. Lives are at stake down there." Linda absorbed their skepticism without visible reaction, though internally she was calculating precise technical challenges that lay ahead. What her teammates didn't understand was that her smaller size wasn't a liability in underwater operations. It was an advantage that saved lives in situations where larger divers couldn't function effectively. "Gentlemen," came a voice from behind them, "the mission parameters have been established and the team assigned. We launch in 30 minutes. Commander Patricia Wells approached the group with the bearing of someone who had earned her position through competence rather than politics. Her weathered face and steady gaze spoke of years spent making life-and-death decisions in conditions where second-guessing could prove fatal. "Commander," Chief Stone said, "with respect, I believe we should reconsider the team composition. This mission requires maximum physical capability, and Morrison's limitations could jeopardize the entire operation." Wells studied Stone for a moment before responding. "Chief, Lieutenant Morrison has the highest success rate of any rescue diver in this unit. Her technical skills are exceptional, and her ability to function in confined spaces has made the difference between success and failure in multiple operations. But at 300 feet, Stone began. At 300 feet, Wells interrupted, we need precision, not just strength. Morrison has both, which is why she's leading this dive. The declaration hit the team like a physical blow. Linda would not only be participating in the mission, she would be commanding it. The looks exchanged between the male divers ranged from disbelief to outright hostility. Commander, Rodriguez said, no disrespect to Morrison, but leadership of a deep rescue requires someone who can physically handle any situation that develops. What if she needs assistance while we're trying to save 12 lives? Linda finally spoke, her voice carrying quiet confidence. Petty Officer Rodriguez, my job isn't to prove my physical capabilities to you. My job is to bring 12 sailors home alive. If you have concerns about following orders from some of my size, you're welcome to request reassignment. The challenge was delivered calmly, professionally, but with underlying steel that surprised everyone present. This wasn't the voice of someone seeking approval or validation. This was the voice of someone who had earned authority through performance. Commander Wells nodded approvingly. The dive plan called for a two-stage rescue operation. Morrison will conduct the initial assessment and establish communication with the trapped crew. Once we understand the internal conditions, the full team will execute the extraction. What none of them knew was that Linda had been preparing for exactly this type of operation for her entire career. Her father had been a commercial deep-sea diver who had died in a rescue attempt when she was 12 years old. From that moment, Linda had dedicated herself to mastering every aspect of underwater operations, not for glory or recognition, but to ensure that other families wouldn't experience the loss that had shaped her childhood. The descent toward the USS Hornet began in conditions that tested even experienced divers. 30-knot winds created surface chop that made maintaining position difficult, while strong currents of depth threatened to sweep rescue divers away from their target. Linda sealed her helmet and ran through final equipment checks with a methodical precision that had become her trademark. Diver 1, this is Control, came Commander Wells' voice through the communication system. Current depth reading shows the submarine at 295 feet. Internal sensors indicate flooding in compartments 2 and 3, with 12 personnel confirmed alive in compartment 4. Copy, Control, Linda replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Beginning descent now. As she dropped through the dark water, Linda felt the familiar transformation that occurred during deep dives. The surface world with its politics and prejudices faded away, replaced by the pure physics of pressure, buoyancy, and life support systems. At these depths, competence was the only currency that mattered. The USS Hornet materialized out of the darkness like a steel leviathan, its hull scarred and partially collapsed from whatever had caused the initial emergency. Linda activated her powerful underwater lights and began a systematic visual inspection of the damage, looking for the safest entry point while avoiding debris that could snag her equipment or compromise her safety line. Control, this is Diver 1, she reported, her voice calm despite the sobering sight before her. Visual assessment shows extensive damage to the forward hull. The conning tower appears intact, but there's significant debris around the main hatch area. Copy, Diver 1. Can you establish entry to compartment 4? Linda maneuvered carefully around the submarine's hull, using her smaller profile to navigate between twisted metal and emergency equipment that would have been impossible for larger divers to manage. This was where her size became an advantage. She could access areas that would be off-limits to her teammates, allowing for more direct routes to trapped personnel. Control, I've located an auxiliary access port on the starboard side. It's partially obstructed, but I can fit through. Larger personnel would require cutting equipment, which would take time we don't have. Negative, Diver 1. Chief Stone's voice cut through the communication system. That access port isn't rated for emergency entry. You need to use the main hatch or wait for cutting equipment. Linda paused, floating 20 feet from the access port in question. She had studied the technical specifications of every submarine class in the Navy, and she knew that the auxiliary port was not only rated for emergency access, it was specifically designed for situations where the main hatch was compromised. Chief, the auxiliary port is emergency rated and provides direct access to compartment 4. Using the main hatch will require me to traverse flooded compartments, which increases risk and decreases efficiency. Morrison, that's an order. Use the main hatch. Linda found herself at a critical decision point. She could follow Chief Stone's order and potentially waste precious time while the trapped sailor's oxygen continued to diminish, or she could use her technical knowledge and experience to take the most effective action. Control, this is Diver 1, she said, addressing Commander Wells directly. Requesting permission to use auxiliary access port based on mission efficiency and trapped personnel survival requirements. There was a pause before Wells responded. Permission granted, Diver 1. Proceed with your best judgment. Linda could almost hear Stone's fury over the communication system, but she focused on the task ahead. She approached the auxiliary port and began the careful process of clearing debris while maintaining her position in the strong current. Her movements were economical and precise, each action calculated to conserve energy and oxygen while making steady progress. The access port opened with a grinding of metal that spoke of damage and distress. Linda checked her equipment one final time, then squeezed through the narrow opening into the flooded interior of the submarine. The space was tight, filled with emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows through the water-filled passages. Control, Diver 1 is inside the submarine. Proceeding to Compartment 4. The journey through the submarine's interior was like navigating an underwater maze filled with obstacles. Floating debris, damaged equipment, and twisted metal created hazards that could snag her airline or damage her suit. But Linda moved with the confidence of someone who had trained for exactly these conditions, her smaller size allowing her to slip between obstacles that would have trapped larger divers. She reached the sealed door to Compartment 4 and began the process of establishing communication with the trapped crew. Using a specialized underwater communication device, she tapped out the Navy's standard rescue protocol signal on the hull. The response came immediately, 12 sharp taps indicating all personnel were conscious and responsive. Linda felt a surge of relief, knowing that the crew was still alive and coherent enough to respond to rescue signals. Control, this is Diver 1. Contact established with trapped personnel. All 12 crew members are responsive. Beginning assessment of extraction options. Linda spent the next 20 minutes conducting a thorough evaluation of compartment's condition. The flooding was contained to forward sections, but the air pocket where the crew waited was slowly diminishing as water continued to seep in through damaged seals. She estimated they had perhaps 2 hours of breathable air remaining. Control, extraction assessment complete. The crew is trapped in an air pocket that's slowly flooding. We need to establish external air supply and begin immediate evacuation through the auxiliary access route. Negative, Diver 1. Stone's voice crackled through the communication system. External air supply requires equipment that can only be transported to the main hatch. Return to the surface, and we'll establish proper entry. Linda checked her chronometer, calculating the time required to return to surface, reconfigure equipment, and establish entry through the main hatch. The mathematics were stark. By the time a conventional rescue could be organized, the trapped sailors would be dead. Control, time constraints don't permit conventional extraction. I'm going to establish emergency air supply through the auxiliary port and begin immediate evacuation. Morrison, that's not possible with your available equipment. Stone replied angrily. You don't have a capacity to handle 12 evacuations through that access route. Chief, I'm not planning to evacuate 12 people through the access port. I'm going to flood Compartment 4 in a controlled manner and bring the crew to the surface using emergency ascent procedures. The silence on the communication channel was deafening. What Linda was proposing had never been attempted at this depth with this many people. It required precise timing, perfect execution, and a level of skill that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in underwater rescue operations. Diver 1. Commander Wells' voice came through clearly. Explain your procedure. Linda outlined her plan with clinical precision. She would establish an emergency air supply to extend the crew's survival time, then gradually flood Compartment 4, while providing individual emergency breathing apparatus to each sailor. Once the compartment was fully flooded, she would lead the crew through the auxiliary access port and conduct a controlled emergency ascent to the surface. The risk of decompression sickness is significant, Wells noted. Yes, Commander, but the alternative is certain death. The air pocket will be gone within 2 hours, and conventional rescue will take at least 4 hours to implement. Wells was quiet for almost a minute before responding. Diver 1, you're authorized to proceed with emergency extraction. Surface support will prepare for multiple decompression treatments. Copy, Control. Beginning emergency extraction now. What followed was the most technically demanding rescue operation Linda had ever attempted. Working alone at 300 feet depth, she established an emergency air line to Compartment 4, providing the trapped crew with additional breathing gas while she prepared for controlled flooding procedure. Through the submarine's internal communication system, she was able to speak directly with the senior enlisted man in the compartment, Chief Petty Officer Williams, explaining the extraction procedure and ensuring that all crew members understood the risks and requirements. Chief Williams, this procedure requires absolute discipline and trust. Each man will receive an emergency breathing apparatus and must follow my instructions precisely. Any deviation could result in death for the entire group. Understood, ma'am, Williams replied, his voice betraying the strain of their situation. The crew is ready to follow your lead. Linda began the delicate process of controlled flooding, gradually introducing water into Compartment 4 while monitoring the crew's condition and ensuring that everyone had functional breathing equipment. The procedure required her to repeatedly enter and exit the compartment, checking on each sailor individually while maintaining the precise balance between flooding rate and crew preparation. At the surface, the rescue team watched their instruments with growing anxiety. Linda had been underwater for over 2 hours, pushing the limits of her air supply and decompression requirements. Chief Stone paced the deck, clearly frustrated by his inability to assist or control the operation. She's been down too long, Rodriguez muttered. Her air supply should be getting critical. Morrison knows her limits, Commander Wells replied, though her own concern was evident. She's the most experienced deep rescue diver we have. 300 feet below, Linda was experiencing the intense focus that came with operating at the absolute edge of human capability. Every movement had to be precise. Every decision calculated to maximize the chances of success, while minimizing risk to the trapped crew. The flooding of Compartment 4 proceeded according to plan, with each sailor receiving individual attention and verification that their emergency breathing equipment was functioning properly. Linda's smaller size proved crucial during this phase, allowing her to move quickly between crew members in increasingly cramped space. Control, this is Diver 1. Compartment 4 is fully flooded, and all crew members are breathing from emergency apparatus. Beginning group ascent now. Copy, Diver 1. Surface support is standing by for emergency decompression. What happened next will be talked about in Navy rescue circles for years to come. Linda led a group of 12 sailors through the submarine's auxiliary access port, managing their emergency ascent while ensuring that no one panicked or lost control of their breathing equipment. The ascent had to be carefully managed to prevent decompression sickness, while still moving quickly enough to avoid exhausting the limited air supply in the emergency breathing apparatus. Linda positioned herself at the center of the group, maintaining visual contact with all 12 sailors while monitoring their condition and controlling the ascent rate. At 200 feet, one of the younger sailors began to panic, his breathing becoming rapid and inefficient. Linda immediately moved to his position, establishing physical contact and using hand signals to calm him down and regulate his breathing. Her presence and confidence had an immediate stabilizing effect, allowing the group to continue their ascent. At 100 feet, they encountered strong currents that threatened to scatter the group. Linda quickly established a human chain, linking all 13 divers together with emergency rope while maintaining their controlled ascent rate. Her ability to organize and lead under extreme stress kept the group coherent and moving towards safety. When they finally broke the surface, the sight was extraordinary. Linda emerged first, immediately conducting a visual accountability of all 12 rescued sailors, while signaling to the surface support team that everyone had survived the ascent. The rescue ship's deck erupted in activity as medical personnel prepared to treat potential decompression injuries and hypothermia. Chief Stone watched in stunned silence as Linda efficiently organized the rescue crew's transfer to medical bay, her professionalism and competence undeniable despite his previous skepticism. One by one, 12 sailors who had been facing certain death were brought aboard the rescue vessel, all conscious and responsive. Diver 1, this is Control. Commander Wells' voice carried obvious relief and admiration. Outstanding performance. Medical evaluation shows all rescue personnel are in stable condition with minimal decompression effects. Linda floated beside the rescue vessel, exhaustion beginning to set in as the adrenaline of the operation faded. Control, request permission to come aboard. I need to debrief while the details are fresh. As she climbed the ladder onto the deck, Linda was met by the quiet respect of teammates who had witnessed something extraordinary. Chief Stone approached her directly, his expression a mixture of admiration and chagrin. "Morrison," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. What you did down there, I've never seen anything like it. You saved 12 lives using techniques I didn't even know were possible." Linda removed her diving helmet, her blonde hair matted with sweat, and her face, showing the strain of 3 hours at extreme depth. But her blue eyes remained alert and focused as she looked at Stone directly. "Chief, the only thing that matters is bringing our people home. Everything else is just ego." Rodriguez stepped forward, clearly struggling with his own preconceptions. "Ma'am, I was wrong about your capabilities. That rescue was impossible, but you made it look routine." "It wasn't routine," Linda replied honestly. "It was dangerous and required precise execution under extreme pressure. But that's why we train, so we can handle the impossible when it becomes necessary." Commander Wells approached with the ship's medical officer, both bearing expressions of professional respect that transcended any considerations of gender or physical size. "Lieutenant Morrison," Wells began, "your performance today was exceptional by any measure. You successfully executed a rescue operation that our standard procedures said was impossible, and you did it without losing a single person." Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's medical officer, joined the group. "Linda, I need to conduct a full medical evaluation, but I want you to know that all 12 rescued sailors are going to make full recoveries. Whatever you did down there, you did it perfectly." As Linda underwent her post-dive medical examination, word of the rescue spread throughout the fleet. By the time the Redemption returned to Norfolk, news of the impossible rescue had reached the highest levels of Navy command. 3 days later, Linda stood in the office of Rear Admiral James Cortez, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. The office walls were lined with photographs and commendations that told the story of the Navy's most challenging operations. But Admiral Cortez seemed more interested in the young woman sitting across from his desk than in his own distinguished career. "Lieutenant Morrison," Admiral Cortez began, "I've been briefing the Chief of Naval Operations on your rescue of the Hornet's crew. The technical analysis of your operation has created quite a stir in our diving and rescue communities." Linda sat at attention, still processing the events of the past few days. The rescue had been successful beyond anyone's expectations, but she was more concerned with the lessons learned than with any personal recognition. "Admiral, the operation succeeded because we adapted our techniques to specific circumstances. Standard procedures weren't adequate for the time constraints we faced." "Lieutenant, what you're describing as adaptation, our technical experts are calling revolutionary. The control flooding technique you developed has applications that extend far beyond submarine rescue." Admiral Cortez opened a folder on his desk, revealing documents that carried the highest levels of classification. "I'm authorized to offer you assignment to the Navy's Advanced Diving Research Unit. Your techniques need to be studied, refined, and incorporated into our training programs." Linda considered the offer carefully. Research and development was prestigious work that would advance her career and contribute to improved rescue capabilities. But something else was pulling at her thoughts. "Admiral, I appreciate the opportunity, but I'd like to request continued assignment to active rescue operations. There are other Chief Stones and Rodriguez's out there who need to see that capability isn't determined by physical size or gender." Admiral Cortez smiled, clearly impressed by her response. "Lieutenant, I was hoping you'd say that. We have a new program designed to establish mixed-gender rescue teams for specialized operations. We need someone with your skills and leadership ability to help develop training protocols." "Mixed-gender teams, sir?" The Navy is recognizing that different physical capabilities can be advantages rather than limitations in specific operational contexts. Your rescue of the Hornet crew proved that smaller, more agile personnel can access areas and perform functions that larger personnel cannot. Linda felt a surge of excitement as she understood the implications. This wasn't just about proving that women could perform in traditionally male roles. It was about optimizing team composition to enhance overall capability. Admiral, I'd be honored to participate in that program. Outstanding. Your first assignment will be establishing training protocols at the Naval Diving and Salvage Training Center. You'll be working with teams from all service branches to develop integrated rescue capabilities. As Linda left Admiral Cortez's office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from skepticism and doubt to recognition and opportunity. The rescue of the Hornet crew had been successful not because she had proved her worth to skeptical teammates, but because she had focused on the mission above all other considerations. 6 months later, Lieutenant Commander Linda Morrison stood before a class of mixed-gender diving students at the Naval Training Center. Her new rank reflected not just the success of the Hornet rescue, but her ongoing contributions to advancing Navy rescue capabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, addressing a class that included both men and women from all service branches. Deep-sea rescue isn't about proving your individual capabilities. It's about leveraging everyone's strengths to achieve mission success. She clicked to a slide showing the technical specifications of various rescue scenarios. Some operations require maximum physical strength. Others require precision and the ability to function in confined spaces. The most effective teams are those that can adapt their approach to the specific requirements of each mission. A young male ensign raised his hand. Commander, how do we overcome skepticism from teammates who doubt our capabilities? Linda smiled, remembering her own experience with Chief Stone and the diving team. Ensign, competence is the only argument that matters in emergency operations. Focus on developing your skills, understanding your equipment, and executing your mission. Everything else is just noise. A female petty officer asked the next question. Commander, what advice do you have for women entering male-dominated specialties? Petty officer, the same advice I give anyone. Be better prepared than everyone else. Never stop learning. And remember that your mission is more important than proving a point. When lives are at stake, personal validation becomes irrelevant. The training program that Linda developed became the gold standard for integrated rescue operations throughout the Navy. Her techniques, refined through extensive research and testing, were incorporated into standard operating procedures and adopted by rescue units worldwide. But perhaps her most significant contribution was changing the culture around capability assessment in dangerous operations. Teams began to be selected based on specific skill requirements rather than traditional assumptions about physical attributes. Chief Stone, now a Master Chief, frequently spoke to new diving classes about the importance of keeping an open mind about teammates' capabilities. His story about initially doubting Linda's abilities became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudgment in life-or-death situations. I nearly cost 12 sailors their lives, he would tell his students, because I let my assumptions about physical capability override my assessment of technical skill and leadership ability. Master Chief Morrison taught me that the most dangerous enemy in rescue operations isn't the depth or the pressure. It's the arrogance that makes you think you know someone's limits better than they do. Rodriguez, promoted to Chief Petty Officer, became one of Linda's strongest advocates in the diving community. His own experience in mixed-gender teams had shown him the advantages of diverse capabilities in complex operations. Commander Morrison didn't just save 12 lives that day. He would explain to anyone who asked about the Hornet rescue. She saved my career by teaching me that the strength of a team comes from leveraging everyone's capabilities, not from limiting participation to people who fit a traditional profile. 2 years after the Hornet rescue, Linda received a message that brought the entire experience full circle. Chief Williams, the senior enlisted man who had been trapped in Compartment 4, had been promoted to Master Chief and assigned as the senior instructor at the Navy's Advanced Diving School. Commander Morrison, his message read, I wanted you to know that every student who comes through this school learns about the Hornet rescue, not just the technical aspects, but the leadership and courage you demonstrated under conditions where most people would have given up. You didn't just save our lives. You changed how the Navy thinks about rescue operations." Linda read the message in her office at the Naval Research Center, where she was developing next-generation underwater rescue technologies. Through her window, she could see diving students conducting training exercises in the harbor, their mixed-gender teams working with the kind of integrated efficiency that was becoming standard throughout the Navy. The transformation hadn't been immediate or universal, but was steady and irreversible. Each successful operation, each life saved, each barrier broken added to a growing body of evidence that capability couldn't be predicted by traditional metrics. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was the Emergency Rescue Coordination Center with news of a submarine in distress off the coast of California. A mechanical failure had trapped 8 sailors at 350 feet depth, with limited time before their air supply was exhausted. Commander Morrison, the duty officer, reported, "We need our best deep rescue team deployed immediately. The conditions are extreme and conventional approaches aren't viable." Linda was already reaching for her equipment bag before the briefing was complete. "I'll have a team wheels up in 30 minutes. Send me everything you have on the situation." As she prepared for another impossible rescue, Linda reflected on the journey that had brought her from doubted team member to recognized expert. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary, not just for her own career, but for everyone who would follow. The submarine waiting in the dark waters off California didn't care about the gender or size of the person coming to the rescue. It only cared about competence, courage, and the unwavering determination to bring people home alive. Linda Morrison had all three in abundance, earned through years of training, refined through countless operations, and proven in the depths where only skill and determination mattered. As her aircraft lifted off toward another mission that would test the limits of human capability, she carried with her the knowledge that barriers existed to be broken, assumptions existed to be challenged, and lives existed to be saved. The ocean was waiting, dark and unforgiving as always, but Linda Morrison was ready, as she always had been, to dive into the depths and emerge with proof that courage comes in all sizes. Strength takes many forms, and heroes are defined not by how they look, but by what they're willing to risk for others. 300 feet below the surface, 8 sailors were counting on someone small enough, skilled enough, and determined enough to reach them in time. They were about to discover that their rescuer was all three, and more than they could have imagined possible.